Well, what is the five-step process of figuring out your retirement? Today we're going to take a look. Stay tuned for Prudent Money. Good afternoon. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thanks so much for joining me today. You know I do appreciate it. I want to make sure that you know about the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Go check it out and tell us what you think about it. We have a lot of information on there, and there's a lot to digest. So go check it out. You can also send a question in to the website. At the top of the page, there's a link called Ask Prudent Money. Just go through, write in your question, send it to us. We'll answer to give you our thoughts about the question and get you taken care of. That's all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. I wanted to talk a little bit, and this is what I typically do on Thursdays, is talk a little bit about what we didn't get around to discussing the first 3 days of the week. Because today's Thursday and obviously Friday. And if you have not listened to the Friday program of Prudent Money, we do the special Car Corner edition of Prudent Money. It's a very unusual show, but we do it because, and Tony, Joe, and I have been doing it for 20 plus years. We do it because your automobile is one of the biggest major expenses that you'll encounter throughout your lifetime. So we teach you how to save money on all that and how things work. I think that's one of the biggest problems with most people. When something goes wrong with their car, they end up having to automatically trust someone that they may not be needing to trust because they don't have their best interest at heart, and they end up spending a lot of money that they don't need to be spending. So we do that on Friday, but on Thursday, like I said, we want to get caught up on the week and talk a little bit about some of the questions we didn't cover. So, dear Bob, is it just me, or are we actually seeing AI starting to take over the current business model that we've had for years? It seems to be moving fast. I came to two conclusions this week. The first one is, and I forgot to mention this yesterday when we were, not yesterday, I think the day before, when we were talking about this very subject. And it's interesting to me because AI, artificial intelligence, robots, whatever you would refer to it as, it all seems something way off into the future and something that will gradually build towards until really this month, when it was apparent that all these companies are having these major layoffs and they're slightly starting to turn to artificial intelligence to replace people. And I don't think it's just me. I've talked to a lot of people and I said, yeah, this is what I've noticed as well. They won't come out. So some companies are bold enough to come out and say what they're doing, but you get words like streamlined and innovative and trying to cost cut. And of course, you also have your handful of companies that are genuinely concerned about, not about AI, but concerned about what the economy is doing. So they feel like they're in good company. If XYZ company is cutting, they're cutting, and maybe the market will be a little bit more forgiving of that. So that's the first thing that really did strike me, is that this is coming on faster than we think. Now, what's interesting, the second thing that really jumped out at me is that there's got to be this transition period in adopting the technology of AI. And this is where the problems could really, really come in. It's kind of like I can use this I think as a good example. When you think about electric cars, and this was the big political push in Washington, and everybody's going to have an electric car by 2023. I think that was the date about 10 years ago. And I always thought to myself, well, number one, we don't have the infrastructure for it, and we don't have a lot of the components that are going to be needed to have a big shift in the environment and how this will affect automobiles. I mean, we were just not ready for it. But yet, the electric car after electric car company kept on building these cars. And, what ended up happening is that when President Trump got into office, that idea kind of went away because it just wasn't on his agenda. And so there you have it. But it never happened because the transition was not as built up as it is with AI. And so, but you have all these technology companies ready to go. You got the product, but then you have corporate America. The tech companies obviously are they're all on board, but that's not for every company that's saying, yeah, we should go ahead and adopt AI. Yeah, we should go ahead and take the plunge and be a pioneer, because they're going to obviously look at it that way. So my conclusion was we're going to have a very nasty transition. And what that looks like, I have no idea. And when you think about the databases that are needed, you think about the electricity that's needed to make all this happen. There's a lot going on. And so, as you're letting go people, and you're jumping into a new frontier of technology, it'll be interesting to see how it all works and takes place. But that's what I did fail to mention yesterday. I did want to make that comment that it's not going to be just like flipping a switch. There's a lot of things that have to happen, a lot of things that have to change, a lot of things that have to be accepted. And I just don't think that's going to come overnight like the tech industry thinks it's going to, just like electric cars wasn't going to, you flip a switch and everybody's going to go buy electric cars. There's a lot to it. And but that's what the new technology, when you have it and you roll it out, that's what they expect. They expect we'll supply the technology, people will come. I don't think that it really does work like that. Then you also have the pressure and the problem with unemployment, what that does. You also have in this nasty transition, I like to call it the nasty transition, you also have what's the question, how does that affect the economy? I think that it negatively affects the economy there for a while. I don't know how long. Then the other thing that I don't think is really not talked about, really worked through, is you have a lot of commercial real estate that's no longer needed because you don't have the workforce that you once had. And the commercial real estate industry is already in a problem with buildings that have gone into foreclosure, and people who owners of banks, I don't know why I keep saying banks, owners of buildings literally taking their keys to the bank and saying, it's yours now. We can't afford to keep this building. It's not fully occupied. We can't afford to keep it. So here are the keys. Go enjoy yourself. So all these, there's all these questions, and I don't think it's just going to be solved overnight. It's just, now that I think about it, our economy, everything's turned into, let's build it. We build it, we have it built. Let's implement it today. And I don't think that things work well that fast. And it's going to need a little bit more time than that. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it. If you got a question for me, comment for me, whatever's on your mind, you can always go to the website, www.prudentmoney.com. We also podcast every program, and we've got a lot of people listening on podcasts. Would love to have you join them if this is not a good regular time for you, if you're not in the car, heading home from work, or wherever you may be listening. So lots of resources all at the website, www.prudentmoney.com. Dear Bob, how do you know what to plan for in retirement when you are 4 years away from it? I don't even know where to start. Any ideas? I had an interesting conversation this morning with a client, and he was talking about, none of this became real to me until I turned 60 and I realized I've saved money. I've gone through all of the motions, but I haven't done the planning. I don't have a game plan. And so when he called me, this was number one on his list. I want to put a game plan together and really figure out how I'm going to get to where I need to go with things I need to do. Here's the good news is that when you've got 4 or 5 years, better yet 10 years, up to 10 years, you can cover a lot of ground that you may not have covered and needed to cover before that. It's all about taking the right steps, considering the right options, being realistic, and being very disciplined, and you can create the kind of retirement that you have always dreamed of creating. Or maybe not the retirement that you've always dreamed of. You can though create a retirement that works. And I think that for most people, their idea of retirement is leaving the stress of work, and it's somewhere between this retirement works to the absolute rock star dream retirement. So it's somewhere in the middle there. But I've always totally disagreed with the way Pop Culture Finance looks at this. In fact, let's go ahead and take a break and we'll get right into it after this. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Stick around. I'll be right back. Hi, my name is Bob Brooks, host of the Prudent Money Radio Show. So let me ask you a question. Do you know your numbers? Now, which numbers are those? They are your retirement numbers. That set of numbers is the single most important planning numbers you can know. Yet the majority of Americans don't even know them. Prudent Money Financial Services, sponsor of the Prudent Money Radio Show, specializes in figuring out those numbers and creating a game plan to make sure you're on the right track. Listen to the Prudent Money Radio Show weekdays at 3 p.m. on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Hi, I'm Jill Taylor, inviting you to join me each Saturday morning at 11 o'clock for Choose Life Radio. You'll hear people from across America sharing their stories of faith, forgiveness, redemption, and restoration. Choose Life Radio will encourage you to fully appreciate the gift of life. You may also find help for you or a friend in need. So please join me Saturday mornings at 11 o'clock right here on Bible School Radio 91.3.
Dynamic, practical, life-changing.
There's no point in going to church and not letting the Christ who gave birth to the church on the day of Pentecost change your life.
Join us each day as Pastor Paul Shepherd applies the timeless truth of Scripture to everyday life. It's Destined for Victory on this great station.
Weekday afternoons at 3:30 here on Bible School Radio, KDKR.
Welcome back. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. Thank you so much for joining me today. You know that I do appreciate it. We're talking about retirement and the things that you need to do. I was mentioning before the break that Pop Culture Finance just says, do this and this and you'll be fine. Save this amount and you'll be fine. Earn this amount and you'll have the retirement of your dreams. I think it's a little bit more detailed than that. And here's the process that I go through with my clients. And I suggest that if you are looking to go through a process, this is the one that you should go through. First of all, you need to take an inventory. And what I mean by that is you need to gather up all the data, all the numbers that you're going to need to figure out your particular numbers. So the first thing you need is your Social Security numbers. You can go to ss.gov if you haven't gotten a recent update, and they'll they'll tell you what your Social Security number is for age 22, age 67. Actually, I think age 65, age 67, and age 70. And remember, the longer that you keep it and you hold on to Social Security, it goes up by 8% every year. So it's just pretty significant how much it grows from one year to the next. So you want to hold it as long as you can. You also want to get done a Social Security analysis so you can determine how much you're going to get, what's the best way to maximize that Social Security. And financial planners, I found that most financial planners that have been in the business for a very, very long time can do that. And but that's the analysis that you want to get for Social Security. You want to find out if you have pension plans, when they start paying out, how much do they pay out, how much do you have to reduce the payment so that your spouse continues to get that payment if something happens to you. You need to organize your investment accounts. And that's simply the latest statement for each one of the accounts. I think the worst that I've seen, someone came in to me and said they had 15 IRAs. Didn't ask where they came from, but 15 IRAs is quite a bit. So, you can consolidate all that. So you get all of your investment accounts, plus also make a note of how much you have in cash. That's also important. Then the hard part is, it's not really hard, it's just tedious. You gather up all your expenses. And you will drive yourself crazy if you try to get the absolute to the dollar. You're just trying to get a ballpark of expenses. Now, when I say ballpark, I don't mean, if I had $10 for every time somebody said this, I would be a rich man. What do you need to live off of on a monthly basis, or monthly or annual basis? And they'll say, well, on a monthly basis, I need somewhere between 4 and 6. Well, 4 and 6 is a big difference between 4,000 and 6,000. There's a huge gap in there. So you want to, I would say if you can get it down into if it's going to be around 4, then make it 4. And you're struggling over whether it's 200 more, 200 less. But so you don't need it to the exact number, but you need it within the ballpark. Let's put it that way. And I would look at credit cards, American Express cards. I would look at bank accounts, your debit cards, and just get a good idea. Jot it down. Get a good idea of what you're spending, and then that's obviously a major part of it. Then you want to do what I call the 5-step approach. And the first step is to plan. You want to have a system of goals. This is where I want to be at this age, and I want always think of it in today's dollars. Let your financial advisor figure out for you what that is in future dollars. But you start out and you figure out what the number in today's dollars is. Say it's $5,000 a month, and that in order to get $5,000 a month from where you are today to where you are in 5 years, 4 years, wherever, these are the steps that you have to take. So you want the structure of the overall retirement plan to be such that you can get to the numbers that you need. Then you want to have the capacity to save. Hopefully, if you are 4 or 5 years away from retirement, you have a high capacity to save money and put it back. And, people talk about saving for retirement. You're saving to fund the retirement process, to get you to where you want, to get you where you need to go. So, it may be that you can spare $500-$600 $800 a month between now and retirement, what's that going to do for you with a reasonable growth rate? The next thing, after you figure out how much you can actually put back in your planning, the numbers that you need to be shooting for, you're going to be investing the money. And investing the money requires that this isn't about putting money in a savings account and saving. This is about knowing your risk level, which is extremely important. We'll always talk a lot about that. Knowing your risk level, and at that risk level, with a reasonable amount of growth you're expecting and you're going to illustrate this with. And I think it's a mistake to say, I'm going to put down 10%. Puts down something that's easy that you think you can manage and that you can get. I've got a client that always says, all I need is 4% a year. If I can do it at 4%, I don't have anything at all to worry about. Then there's risk management. This is also very, very important. I've had people ask the question, what's the most important part of the retirement planning process? And they're all equally important. Risk management is simply to have a system in place to where if the risk level gets high, like I think it is today, these are the changes I'm going to make. These are the adjustments I'm going to make. This is what's going to preserve my money into retirement. I'll tell you, it doesn't matter where you've been, how much success you've had, because from here on, you can blow the whole thing by not having proper risk management. And I can't stress that enough. You've got to have the proper risk management strategy in place to make sure that you are protecting your assets and growing your assets. And that's what I also refer to as a Plan B. Then here's the beauty of this whole system is that you monitor your benchmarks. What does that mean? Well, that means that your benchmark is where you need to be at the end of each year leading up to retirement. And so if you need to have $500,000 saved up and invested by the end of 2025 and you have $450,000, well, you're behind $50,000. So you got to figure out and help get your advisor to help you figure out, or if you're dealing with these numbers and you would like my opinion, all you have to do is go to prudentmoney.com. I'm happy to help. Is figure out if you need to make any changes, and maybe you did have to make a change. And that's what's great about this program is that it's got a lot of flexibility into it. Maybe out of the blue, you find out that your daughter's going to get married and you want to pay for $20,000 of it. Well, what's that going to do to the retirement plan? You check your numbers because you've got your numbers. A lot of confidence that builds knowing what your numbers are. Gives you that flexibility. But you could be needing to be at $500,000. You could be at $600,000. Great problem to have. But just know exactly where you are, what your benchmarks are, whether at any given time you'll know if you're ahead or behind or wherever you need to be. This is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. I'd like to catch up on questions on Thursday if we can do that, and we just had the opportunity to do that, so I'm reading through some of these. How do you know what your interest rate is going to be at the end of the trial period on a balance transfer from a credit card? We talked about that this week, that you got to be careful taking the quote-unquote sweet deal that the credit card company is going to give you when you transfer over your $10,000, $20,000 credit card balance from the old card, your current card, to a new card. And the credit card that we talked about was absolutely a nightmare situation. In fact, I haven't heard of anything this bad since I've been doing financial advising. The company, and unfortunately I don't have the name of the company. It was a Citibank card, and they would just lock up your account where you couldn't use it. After you got the card, after you approved for it, they were demanding something from the IRS. I mean, just an absolute nightmare. But you've got to make sure that you're not putting yourself in front of a fairly decent spot. And, let's say that you're paying 18%. Well, that's not great, but it's better than paying 20-something, 30-something%. And your new credit card rate at the end of the trial period is going to be 25. I wouldn't move it for that type of situation. So it's just about being careful and making sure that you're getting a good value on your interest rate, because the name of the game is low interest rates. Hey, this is Bob Brooks, and you are listening to the Prudent Money Radio Show. If you got a question for me, please go to the website at www.prudentmoney.com. Send it in, and I will get you taken care of. Well, we are all out of time. Until we do meet again next time, keep the faith and have a great rest of the day.
That's all the time we have for today. Questions or comments for Bob, or to find out more great information like what you've just heard, visit www.prudentmoney.com. Be sure to join Bob Brooks again for the next edition of Prudent Money.